There we go. And we'll get started. I think a couple more people might pop in, but we'll start here. So we're sort of winding our way. We're really chugging along pretty quickly through these Dasamaha Vidyas. And I think, Eliza, hi, you haven't been here for any of these yet. So I'm going to catch you up on sort of what we've been doing. So we've been going through these goddesses who are called the Dasamaha Vidyas, and they're the wisdom goddesses. I'm going to mute you all, but you know the deal. Please unmute and chat away. Say anything you like at any point. I'm just trying to keep the background noise to a minimum. So the Dasa Mahavidyas, Dasa means 10, Maha means great, and Vidya means wisdom. And there are these 10 great wisdom goddesses, and a couple of them are really lovely, but most of them are horrific and terrifying. And they're really meant to just like shock you out of your ordinary way of living, thinking, moving, and being. And generally, the more fierce they are, the more motherly and loving they are. It's sort of like two sides of the same coin. And so we've gone through so far, we started with Kali, and she's the one most people know. And then they all sort of like spring forth from there and get more wild as they go on. So we did Kali, we did Matangi, Chinnamasta, we did another one that day. But we did Lalita Tripur Sundari, we did Tara, Matangi, Dhumavati. Did I say Dhumavati? Yeah. And then today we're going to do Bagalamukhi and Tripura Bhairavi. And then next week we will do Bhuvaneshwari and Kamala. And that'll complete our 10 wisdom goddesses. So I did share some pictures on Instagram. I don't know if any of you got a chance to see that, but I'm going to tell you about these goddesses, about Bagalamukhi and Tripura Bhairavi. I'm trying to figure which one we should do first. I think we'll do Bagalamukhi first because I have a lot to say. I actually didn't think I had anything to say about her because there's almost nothing really there about her. She's the most enigmatic of all these Mahavidyas. Nobody knows what her name means. Nobody exactly knows where she came from. Nobody really. There's only one temple, I think, that has her where they worship her. But then the more I get into her, the more excited I got. So I think we'll start with her, and then whatever time we have left, we'll do Bhairavi. So Bagalamukhi, Bagala, nobody knows what her name means, Bagalamukhi. And so Vagala, it means bridle, like a horse's bridle, right? The thing you put in their mouth, almost like a muzzle. It's sort of like leads the horse around. And oh good, Samantha's here. Okay, hang on, just letting a couple more people in. Everybody in. Hi, Samantha, are you here? There she is. Oh, just connecting. Yay, I'm so happy you made it. Yay, good. We're doing Bagalamukhi and Bhairavi today, Tripura Bhairavi. So I'm just talking about Bagalamukhi, about how nobody knows what her name means. So two guesses. The one guess is that it's sort of a both guesses have to do with a word that got sort of like confused. And so Vagala is like the author I mentioned. Oh yeah, her name is Madeline Miller, who writes these amazing books. I can't wait to hear what you think about them. So Vagala means a bridle. And so some people think that that's where her name comes from, but bridal face, it doesn't make, Mukhi means face, right? So Bagalamukhi doesn't quite make sense because she doesn't look like she has a bridal face, or there's nothing about a bridal anywhere else in her iconography. And then the other thing that people think it came from is maybe Bagala is some sort of play on the word baka, which means crane. So they call her the crane-faced one. But again, there's no thing that they never show her with a crane face or a crane anything. So it's really super sort of confusing, and I think that speaks to a lot about what she's about, actually, is that it's like she's confusing. She's like this unknown goddess. And I certainly feel right now like I am living in this great big space of unknown. And she's really, to me, of all the goddesses we've talked about, Dhumavati, the goddess of disappointment, is one I've been thinking about a lot. But this one too, Bagalamukhi, she's the goddess of paralyzation. She's the goddess of stopping, the goddess of it's called Stambana, and it's actually one of the cities. So of all of these 10 wisdom goddesses, she's actually considered to be the most powerful when it comes to granting magical things. And she's in charge of the 8 cities, the 8 magical powers, one of which is called Stambana, and it's the power to paralyze or immobilize your enemy. And when you think about it, right, we're not talking about like enemies out there necessarily, although sometimes we are. Mostly it's enemies in here. And so she stands for that power to put a big gap in things. And there are a couple of stories of how she came to be. One of them, they're really small. She's not like Lalita, where we had this big, giant, epic battle story. These are just like 1-minute stories. So in one of them, there was a huge storm, a great cosmic storm that was threatening to destroy the entire world. And Vishnu prayed to Lalita Tripura Sundari, and she went and conjured up, she went to a lake, a yellow lake, and she conjured up this goddess Bagalamukhi who came rising from this yellow lake, and she immediately calmed the storm and stopped the chaos. And so that tells you something about that, like the ability to cut through the chaos, the ability to stop the storm right in its tracks. And then the other story about her, and this goes with the image that I shared, the image of her. Oh, let me describe it to you. I made a little description here of her image. So Bagalamukhi sits on a golden throne in the midst of an ocean in an altar. Her complexion is golden, bright yellow. She's clad in yellow clothes. She's adorned by a garland of yellow flowers and decked with yellow ornaments. She pulls the tongue of a demon by her left hand while raising her right hand to strike him with a club. Another description says that she has 4 arms and a third eye, and a crescent moon adorns her forehead. Though generally depicted with a human head, sometimes she's described to have the head of a crane, and sometimes riding a crane. Sometimes she's associated with other birds, like having a duck head or the nose of a parrot. So there you go. But mainly the thing is that every image, if you Google her, she's grabbing this demon, and the demon is always green, and the demon always has a mustache. This is just a funny thing. And for anybody who's studied with me a lot, you know this. We talk about this in the stories, that for some reason, if you're ever looking at images of Hindu mythology and you're trying to figure out who's the good ones and who's the bad ones always have a mustache. I don't know why that is, but it's a thing. And generally too, like the worse they are, the bigger and curlier their mustaches. So like, for example, in the story of Sita and Ram, Ravana is the 10-headed demon that snatches Sita and causes all this trouble, and all 10 of his heads have big handlebar mustaches. So I don't know what that says about dudes with mustaches, but we won't go there. So this demon, he's green, he's sort of like fierce and wild looking, and she's grabbing him literally by the tongue, and in her other hand she's got this big thing that she's going to whack him with. It looks like a rolling pin almost. And so this is the story with this particular demon. His name was Madan, and Madan had done all of these austerities. He'd done yoga, basically. He did his practices just like we do, and he got a boon from Brahma, and this boon gave him what's called Vaksiddhi. Vaksiddhi is the power of speech, to where everything that you say becomes true. And so he's got this power where everything he says, it becomes the truth. And in doing so, he sows chaos everywhere. He causes so much chaos and so much disruption all over the world. I mean, hello, Facebook, right? Is it like, so it's so interesting that like something so untrue, people can just put it out there as the truth, and like suddenly this thing becomes the truth for so many people, and it causes so much chaos and so much disruption. And so that's what this demon is. And so he's doing this, and none of the gods can defeat him. And so they conjure up, they call upon the goddess to embody, and she embodies herself as this goddess Bagalamukhi, who goes and attacks the demon, grabs him by the tongue, and kills him by hitting him over the head. But in the end, the demon actually cries, and he begs to her, please, 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 don't kill me, don't kill me. You know, I want to be worshipped with you. And so she's almost always seen with the demon, which I find kind of interesting. Like all these goddesses they're always speaking to that idea of like, you can't avoid the shadow, can't pretend, we're not going to like pretend it's not there. And she actually embraces the shadow. Hi, sweetheart. Kid just woke up. She embraces the shadow, and she gets to have the shadow with her. The demon sits with her in all of these images in the temple where she's worshipped. Hi, pumpkin. So that's Bagalamukhi. And let me see if I missed anything about her. Oh, turmeric. She's associated with turmeric, right? Because yellow. And so she comes out of this yellow lake. And if you want to be a worshiper of Bagalamukhi, or if you just want to remember her energy and carry it with you throughout the day, you could, it's kind of funny, like when you cook with turmeric, doesn't it stay on your hands like forever? So you could make something with turmeric in the morning, it'll be with you all day. Or if you want to be like her devotees in India, you wear a mala that's made of turmeric, actually. So I don't know where you would get one of those, but I'm sure if you Google hard enough, you could find one. So she's the giver of the 8 cities, the 8 super magical powers, but most strongly associated with the power of paralyzation, right? Stopping, holding the tongue. And she also, in the image that I shared on Instagram and on Facebook, she's holding the demon by the tongue. She's got her weapon, but underneath her is another dead being. It's a corpse, like lying underneath her, and she's sitting on top of him. And this is so common in all of these goddesses, not all of them, but in a lot of these wisdom goddesses, there's some element of death, right? We've been talking about this a lot, that these goddesses are all about like the merging of sex and death and love and beauty and pain and terror and all of it. And so she's sitting on this corpse, and it's probably a reference to something in Tantra and a tantric practice that's called Shava Sadhana. And I wonder, I couldn't find anything about this, but you know what we do at the end of a yoga class, Shavasana, right? We do corpse pose. And I have a feeling that it's rooted in this practice, that this practice was some precursor to this little sort of ode to death that we do at the end of our practice. But Shava Sadhana is a literal practice where you worship, you do sadhana, you do a practice with a corpse. And it's considered, like last week we talked about the secret practices of Tara, how it's like these practices are meant, you know, they're not for regular people, right? We're not going to just like start doing yoga and then go get a corpse and go to the forest and sit on it and worship it. Like, you know, no, we're not. But they are still happening. People still do these practices, but they're meant for like, it's like the last step. And they say, they use words when discussing these practices of like secret or hidden or advanced. So let's see what Masha says. I love that you all chat. Thank you. In herbal medicine, turmeric becomes most biologically available when combined with fat, milk, and spices, pepper, thinking about the goddess being with her demon. Yeah, so true. And so it's just, I love that. It's like all of like, yeah, like all of these practices are just, they're dangerous, they're wild, they're secret. David Kinsley, a lot of my information comes from David Kinsley. He's probably the only one who's written well about these Mahavidya goddesses, who's written like plenty of scholarly stuff, but even still, there's not that much. And it's heavy duty reading. You know, I don't suggest it unless you really like, you know, unless you want to feel like you're, you know, back in college and studying for your your PhD or something. It's that kind of stuff. But he says that these practices are all meant to be done alone, which I find kind of been there, done that. Yeah. Find it kind of interesting that all of these elevated, these considered advanced and secret tantric practices are very solitary and very like, they're all done like this Shava Sadhana, this worship of a corpse, is done either in a graveyard, in a cremation ground, or in a forest where no one is, or even said in an abandoned house. Ooh, how creepy is that, right? Bring a dead body to an abandoned house. And they say too, you know, Kinsley says, the books say that this practice is so intense that it could either provide ultimate liberation, extreme ecstasy, or it'll make you go insane. So, I don't recommend it, not yet anyway, but there's a lot of ritual specific rules and rituals about it. And you can read about it if you Google it, Shavasana. And you have to get a very specific kind of body. You bring the body to this place, you wash the body, you clean the body. You even do, there's specific ways to do the hair of the corpse. You have to tie the hair up so that the energy doesn't go out. Tying the hair is a symbol of keeping the energy in. And you worship this body and you offer it flowers and all kinds of things, and you chant mantras to this body. I mean, and last step, you get on it like a horse. You actually, and so many images of these goddesses. We saw it with Chinnamasta, who's the goddess who cuts her own head off. She's on top of Shiva, like in a squat pose, almost like riding a horse. All the tantric goddesses, they're always on top of the man. I'll leave that one there too. But there's something about that. There's something about being on top that's really interesting. It sounds like a home funeral, but we don't mount our corpses. Yeah, that's so true. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe some people do. But yeah, it is like a home funeral. And what you're supposed to do when you do this, one should think about what makes oneself different from the body. You sit and you watch this body, you get right on top of this body, and you meditate on what makes you the same and what makes you different from this body that you are kneeling on or squatting over. And this is what brings you liberation. It's all about making peace with temporality. It's all about time. And so, wow, anybody ever done Shavasana? No, I didn't think so. But, who knows? Maybe we will. But, back to this idea, I'm going to pause for a moment. Does anybody want to share anything? Or I love that you're using the chat box. You could keep doing that, or you could unmute yourself. No? Okay. So we'll go on. Oh, Sonia, yeah.
I just thought of maybe like a thread we could correlate with why we don't understand the meaning of her name. In like the magical tradition, the high priestess notoriously never names herself. She never like announces that she holds that position. And the theory is that, you don't talk about it, you be about it. So it's kind of like as the gatekeeper of all of the magical cities and stuff, like, I don't know, we could guess that maybe it's part of her responsibility to like not name herself.
Maybe. And like we're trying to get away from identities and names and descriptions, and all of these goddesses are like, stop, like all that stuff is not you. And she's the hugest one to say that. So maybe. Thank you. Anybody else? No? All right. So back to this idea of immobilizing, stambhana, that everything has to come to a stop. And here we are in the stop. We talked about it with Dhumavati, right? The void. How there's no going back. There's no past that we can just magically go back to. There's no normal. We're not going to just go back to normal. And the future is completely up in the air and uncertain. And here we are, just at a dead stop. We can't go forward, we can't go back, kind of like Dhumavati on her chariot with no horses, where she's just stuck at the intersection. And everything has to come to a stop so that new things can be born, right? All of these goddesses are somewhat identified with Shiva, the power of destruction. And perhaps she's telling us, well, here, there's a beautiful word in Japanese. This is my other life that probably nobody would guess, but I have an undergrad degree in Japanese, which has not served me at all in my adult life. But although once in a while, times like this, where there's a word in Japanese that we don't have a translation for, but it's so beautiful. The word is yutori. Yutori, I'll write it down in the comments. Yutori, and to describe it best, so one way to explain yutori is a sense of spaciousness, like that you give yourself. Like in Japan, students use it a lot for that term. Like when you take a break between high school and college, you take like a gap year. They call that yutori, like giving yourself some space, a gap. Or it's like, say you have a meeting at 9 o'clock, you have a job interview. You're going to take a train. Instead of taking a train that gets you there at 8:57, you take the train that gets you there at 8:30 or 8:15, so that you have yutori. You have a little amount of spaciousness, some breathing room. And the same thing, it applies also on a deeper, kind of more mystical level with like poetry. Say, like you could read a poem, but then you don't have to, you get out of this brain, this analytical brain, and instead of analyzing, instead of evaluating and trying to figure out, you just sort of hold it, and it allows you to see differently, right? Sounds like the name for a yoga studio. Yeah, one of my students, I've talked about this word a lot. It's one of my favorite words. And one of my students actually got it tattooed on his arm. Like, that's so great. But it's really powerful that if you could step back, and it's just the space to not plan, not evaluate, not figure out, and be in the pause. It's like the bardo. You know, if you know anything about Buddhism, about the bardo is the in-between space between death and reincarnation. And it's like, it's just this empty space. And empty space can be really terrifying, right? But it's also the most fertile space, because it allows the rupture. There's a rupture that allows for something new to come about, but only when we really find that gap break in our familiar routine can something really wildly different come about. And I keep thinking about like evolution, right? And how apes were walking on all fours. And then at some point, some ape stood up, right? That must have been something, that moment. And like, no ape had ever done that before. I wish I could have been there for that moment, but we are there. We're here now for that moment, right? It's like we've been like this. And then all of a sudden, the virus and the world was like, put the brakes on, stop. Everything stops. There's not even any traffic, right? And in that moment of stopping, we have a choice. We can fill it with our bullshit, or we can be the ape that stood up. And we can, and that's terrifying. Like, imagine how that must have felt to be the only one, like suddenly standing up. But that's the gift, right? That we could break out of the familiar and something new can suddenly arise from this in-between space. So she's the pause. So I wanted to read from something from a Buddhist magazine about the bardo. So the Tibetan term bardo, or intermediate state, is not just a reference to the afterlife. It also refers more generally to those moments when gaps appear, interrupting the continuity that we otherwise project onto our lives. In American culture, we sometimes refer to this as having the rug pulled out from under us or feeling ungrounded. These interruptions in our normal sense of certainty are what's being referred to by the term bardo. But to be precise, bardo refers to that state in which we have lost our old reality and it's no longer available to us. Whoa, like if that isn't where we are right now, then I don't know what is. So another pause for a moment there. I'll drink my coffee for a second. On Wednesdays, I get to have 2 cups of coffee. That's my gift for doing these workshops, and I just so enjoy it. Where did that come from? It came from the Buddhist magazine, Lion. And I can tell you exactly where. Do I still have it? Yeah, Lion's Roar, sorry. And it's a great article. It's a big article, so it's not just that little, it's called Lion's Roar is the magazine, and the article is called Breaking Open in the Bardo. And so, yeah, highly recommended for anyone who's interested in this idea to do some more digging on the Bardo. And, you know, this is from Milarepa, who's a great philosopher, thinker, poet, yogi. Milarepa says, the precious pot containing my riches becomes my teacher in the very moment that it breaks. Right? And that, to me, I was like, oh, that's Bagalamukhi right there. Yeah. Any questions or thoughts on this goddess, this yellow goddess? So she's all bright and yellow and turmeric and yellow flowers and yellow everything. Nobody knows why yellow, also, by the way. It's a complete mystery why she's associated with yellow. Nobody knows what yellow means, except that it's one step away from white, which is purity. But we have no real answers. And isn't that great? We don't need answers. You don't need an answer to everything. That I'm telling myself that, by the way. You don't need an answer to everything. I'm somebody who always wants to know, how's this gonna work? What's gonna happen? What's next? What's the plan? What time are we going? What time will we be back? You know, that kind of stuff. Like, I need to know. And sometimes there's a space for that. And other times you just gotta, we have no idea what's gonna happen. No idea. And can we just live in that yutori, that space of not trying to figure anything out, but just holding space. There's some chats. Let me check here. Canadian author called, oh, link it in the Bardo. Yeah, that came up when I was looking at stuff this morning. I want to read it too. Also, the energetic of dandelion, yellow is to break open, shatter, to regenerate. Oh my God, that's amazing. And dandelions are everywhere right now. We're in mega dandelions. So go ahead, let's worship Bagalamukhi today by making something with turmeric and getting our fingers all stained with turmeric. Should read it, it's a good book. Okay, we'll get our fingers all stained with turmeric, and then we'll collect a whole bunch of dandelions and put them in our house, and then just read a poem that makes no sense to you. Read a poem that's just beautiful, that's just full of loveliness, and you have no idea what it means, and that's totally okay. And just be with it, and just be in this space, be held in this void that we're in. And just sort of float like you're just a little speck. You know, like when you blow on a dandelion, when they turn into the little white puffs, like you're just one little speck of the dandelion just floating in the sky with no agenda and no need to like plan what's next. Stomach bile. Yeah, you all are so brilliant. I love you. Love that much. I'm not going to look at dandelions in the same way. Think of stomach bile, dissolving gossip. Ooh, yeah. There was one of them. There was something about gossip with Bagalamukhi, actually. That's so funny that you say that. It was because of the tongue, right? And one of the things they say is that she's the power to use your words, to use it positively, like to use really clear words to just cut through bullshit and to just cut your enemy right off, you know, like a great lawyer, like to have like the words to just stop somebody in their tracks when they're just, you know, spewing nonsense left and right. But also, yeah, it has to do with gossip too, that she, and her shadow, you know, all these goddesses, they have light and shadow. And so the shadow side of Bagalamukhi is gossip and clutter. Clutter. You could think of her as just like clarity, space, and light. But on the other side of that, there's gossip, there's clutter, there's too many words, there's too many thoughts, there's too much figuring and need to analyze. And so we use her to cut through that. Anybody else? Bagalamukhi, our divine vision in yellow. All right, so we'll move on. And the next one, she is Tripura Bhairavi. And Tripura Bhairavi, she's another one that she's sort of confusing. Like you could look up images of her and they vary so wildly. So from everything to her looking exactly like Durga. Exactly, like you could put Durga and Bhairavi next to each other, no difference. Both riding a tiger, both with many arms, both these warrior goddesses. She also looks like Kali. In some images, she is exactly the same as Kali, where she wears the garland of skulls and she's always blood. This one, she loves blood. She's like Matangi. We talked about Matangi and how Matangi loves menstrual blood. Same thing with Bhairavi. She actually, her lips are smeared with blood and her breasts are smeared with blood. I mean, what an image, bloody breasts. I just think about like, you know, and I have a 13-year-old boy who thinks like periods. I'm trying to teach him that periods are not gross, you know, like men are so like, they're so afraid of women's menstrual cycles and menstrual blood. It seems like, unless it's like an elevated man, but most of them are kind of, so to like, imagine like taking your own menstrual blood and smearing it. That'll be our practice, right? For Bhairavi. So we've got some homework, okay? So you got your Bagalamukhi yellow practices. And then for Bhairavi, the next time you get your period, smear it all over your breasts and just like take a power push. She's always, you know, she's got the Abhaya Mudra. Always, they could like a warrior. It's like your battle blood and Abhaya Mudra. But she's got all this, she kind of like goes all over the place as far as iconography. But I'll read you one description of her. And honestly, I don't know where I got this. I just clipped it from VedicGoddesses.com, I think is where it's from. So she's usually depicted as having red skin, 3 eyes, and blood smeared on her lips and breasts. She smiles softly and wears a moon on her crown. She's shown holding a book, a mala, and fearful boon conferring gestures. Her childlike nature is portrayed as Bala Tripura Sundari, which changes to a horrible appearance when she enters a battlefield. And the blood in her mouth reflects demons that have succumbed in war. In the war front, her body is covered with a tiger skin and a skull garland. Her right hand gestures Abhaya Mudra, and her left hand is Varada Mudra. So just like Lakshmi, she's saying no fear, and I'm giving you all the blessings. So here we have another sort of terrifying, fearsome goddess who just wants nothing but the best for you. Who just, all of these goddesses, we mentioned this with Kali and with Bhairavi, it's definitely the same, is that they don't care about your comfort. They don't care about being dainty or pretty. All they care about is your liberation. All they care about is waking you up and moving you out of your shit and your stories that keep you down and these old belief systems that keep you stuck where you are. They just want to move you up. And Bhairavi, she's associated with the rising Kundalini energy, and she's considered to be the goddess of the root chakra. The root chakra, as far as like fear and bones and physicality and blood, and she's just like really a power warrior goddess. Thing about the chakras, you know, I just took this amazing workshop called Chakras No Bullshit. And it was so great because I've, you know, if you're one of my students regularly, you know that I talk about the chakras a lot, like the colors are all bullshit, all the glands they're associated with are mostly bullshit. It's like just something that somebody decided and we all went with it. And what I learned is was really great, and it has to do with what we're talking about, because it has to do with the patriarchy. That the chakras, the reason we talk about the chakras and the 7 chakra system the way we do is because some white guy wrote a book about it. Right? Because there were a million chakra systems and they were all so wildly different. But then in the 19-teens, some white dude with some, you know, sort of expertise wrote a book about it, and we all went with that one because it was in English. Isn't that interesting? And so I always challenge you to like question where everything comes from. Do you know the colors of the chakras? This is a little bit of a tangent, but I feel very strongly about this, so I always like to say it. So the colors of the chakras, right? The whole Roiji Biv, and they're like the rainbow and all that. Do you think that's ancient? That is so not ancient. It's from the 70s. And it's just, again, because some white dude wrote a book and he was like, oh, this goes with it. There's 7 of these, there's 7 of those. Boom, done. Let's call it a done deal. So go back with your sources. Same thing with all this goddess stuff, like with everything. go back as far as you can. Try to get, like, you find a source, find that source's source, and find that source's source, because so much of it is just one person's opinion. And it's really terrifying, I think, when we take, even like what I tell you, right? Don't believe everything I tell you. Take it and then question it. Because especially if you're a yoga teacher and we hear something and then we just go and repeat it, and then our students repeat it, and suddenly it becomes a thing that's true. And here we are with Vak, right? The power of speech, right? That as a yoga teacher, we sort of have that. Or as anybody who's like in front of a bunch of people with any kind of authority, and you say something, here's Bagalamukhi again, right? You say something as if it's true, and all the people listening to you take it as truth, right? Like there's 7 chakras. We all took it as truth, even though before that there was 5 or 3 or 11, right? Or same thing, the colors of the chakras. Somebody says they're red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, and we all go, oh, okay. And then we pass it on as if it's the ultimate truth. And it's just one person's truth. So keep that in mind. So even when I'm going to share with you about, oh, fuck, I know. I had just, I mean, do you mind, is it okay that we're going on a slight tangent here? I'll get back to Bhairavi in a second. Okay, cool. So I had like a real crisis a while ago when, God, the book, The Roots of Yoga, James Mallinson's book. James Mallinson is amazing. He's a yogic Sanskrit scholar, a yoga scholar, doctor of yoga. And he wrote this book called The Roots of Yoga. And it's a compilation of sort of all this great scholarly source information about yoga history. And he's talking about the nadis, right? The energy channels. And what do we teach in yoga? We've got Sushumna Nadi, the main one, and then we've got Ida and Pingala that crisscross and go up like that, right? Well, before that, there was just one on the top and one on the bottom. And there's a million other systems. And somehow it's sort of condensed. And at some point, we all like, say, okay, sure, we'll go with this one where we do the 3. And we all teach that like it's fact, right? If you took a yoga teacher training, did you hear about that? Like it was a fact. Is it a fact? Do you feel it? No, I don't know. I freaked when I read that. I was like, how do I know anything's true? I questioned everything I'd ever been taught by anybody. Like, what's true, what's not? The 3 heavens, and someone changed it to be working on the 7 chakra system. Yeah, it's so true. So I went to one of my favorite teachers, who happens to be my girlfriend also. I'm very lucky that she's super, super wise, way wiser than I am. And so I came to her with my crisis, and she had me sit and meditate. And she said, what do you feel? Do you feel Ida and Pingala? Do you feel Sushumna? Is it true for you? Do you feel Ida and Pingala? And I sat with it for a long time, and I felt some central channel. I did not feel this. So guess what? I don't teach this anymore, because to me, it's just not real. But maybe to you it is. So you teach it, but always teach it with like, this is my experience. All this yoga stuff, you gotta approach it like that. Like, this is just me sharing what's my experience of the goddesses, what's my experience of yoga. And if it resonates with you, if you feel it, great. If you don't, throw it away. Okay? So moving on to Bhairavi. Bhairavi comes her name. Bhairavi, it means fierce or horrible or terrible. But it also comes from 3 different things, Ba, Ra, and Va. Ba being the power of preservation, Ra, the power of creation, and Va, the power of destruction. So whereas the male gods, right, Brahma is creation, Vishnu is preservation, Shiva is destruction. Well, guess who gets to be all 3 things in one? The goddess. The goddess doesn't have to separate herself out like that. She is all of those things in one. She is very fond of blood, especially menstrual blood. And she is the goddess of decay. The goddess of decay. Actually, my girlfriend and I were talking yesterday, and she was laughing. She said, we were talking about the Buddhist app, We Croak. I think I've told you about this before. It's an app where it just randomly tells you that you're going to die. as a reminder. It'll just like pop up on your phone and it'll be like, guess what? You're going to die. And then it gives you some Buddhist practices and meditations to work with. And my girlfriend, she said, yeah, life is sort of like taking a cruise, going on a cruise ship that you know is sinking. Like, right? Like we get on this cruise ship and we know it's sinking, but here we are anyway, and we're gonna like play shuffleboard and try to have a good time while we're here. But Bhairavi is that goddess. She's the goddess of the decay of the body. She's the goddess not of like, so Chinnamasta, going back to Chinnamasta, and if you weren't here for this one, she's a goddess who cuts her own head off in this moment. She just cuts it off like that. So she's the goddess of like fast transformation, of like when shit just hits the fan and immediately everything changes. Whereas Bhairavi, she's the goddess of constant change, the goddess of constant degradation and decay, constant destruction. And so, that's something to really remember and not be afraid of. We talked about it with Dhumavati a little bit about as women, it's really hard. Well, as a human being, it's hard to watch your body decay. But I think especially for women, it can be really hard as we become, older and more invisible. And so Bhairavi is a goddess who welcomes decay and who actually shines brighter and brighter. The more decay, she thrives on it. The more things decay, the more things fall apart, the brighter and more powerful she gets. So I try to remember that when I look in the mirror and suddenly I'm like, how did I get my mom's belly button? I didn't have that, and then all of a sudden it's like folded over, like what? Or all of a sudden when I take a picture and I go like this, the skin falls this way, and like, also I remember that this is all happening because I'm getting older and wiser and hopefully more strong and interesting and resilient with some wisdom to share. So that's Bhairavi. And any questions or thoughts on that? I'll pause for one moment here. Ooh, I'll have like 15 minutes left. No? Okay. So Bhairavi is also associated with tapas. Tapas, I'm sure most of you know, but if you don't, the word in yoga, it's like fire, heat. One of my teachers, when I first started doing yoga, she said this, I'll never forget it. She said, it's the willingness to go through the fire, knowing that transformation is on the other side. So it's not just fire, just for fire's sake, just to like beat yourself up and, you've been bad, you need to go in the fire. But it's fire for transformation. It's fire for wisdom and self-awakening. And, they say that Bhairavi is an insatiable fire that's driving spiritual growth. This is from David Frawley. He says, she creates the inner desire and passion necessary to impel the soul upward into seeking something truly fulfilling. And it's uncomfortable, right? It's like, we're in this moment right now where we could just be so lazy, and that's okay too. And I'm not like shaming anybody who's not like changing their whole life, and great, like be lazy. We're in a really traumatic time. But Bhairavi is like saying, she's nudging you like, come on, get up. I know it's not comfortable. I know you don't want to, but come on, we got to stand up. We got to get up. We got to do this. And she can give you passion. She can light the fire underneath you when the fire's gone out. And I know I certainly need that. My fire goes out all the time. I'm really like kapha, and I tend to be like on the lazy side. I don't really want to do a lot. And so I know for people like myself that Bhairavi is good to think about. Just think about her like the spark in the root chakra, the spark in the base of you. And she helps things go up. She helps you move up. She helps you remember that that we need passion. We need that spark. It's like the volcanic, she's like the volcanic fire under the earth's crust. Right? It's there. It's always there. Sometimes we forget, especially when we live somewhere where there's no volcanoes and everything's just fine. And then every once in a while, right? Like if you've ever been to Bali, when I was in Bali 2 years ago, this volcano, Mount Agung, does she have a chant? Yeah, they all have a chant. And you can go, they all have, the chants are, so there's usually Om followed by a seed sound, and they're different, and I can't remember what Bhairavi's is, but you can Google it. And I think it's Hlim, might be, or that might be Bagalamukhi's, but it's something like Om, Hlim, and then it'll have their name, and then like a Namaha, Namaha Om. You know, usually that's sort of the generic form for all the chants. Like Om, seed sound, the name of the goddess, Namaha Om. And so you can look them up, and you can do any. Oh, that was private. Oh, you know, I'm going to do not private. I just did that private, but to everyone here, Om, Hlim. And I'm going to put in parentheses seed sound, so it's different for every goddess. The name of the goddess, and then a Namaha. Oh, they want it to be Yamaha. No, Nama. Oh, so that's the general form of the chant for all the goddesses. And you just substitute the seed sound in the name of the goddess, and you repeat it like japa. You just repeat it, repeat it, repeat it. And that'll, you know, that's the magic formula. We talked about this in my mudra workshop the other day, that it's a 3-layer formula. If you want to, this is Tantra, and I said this in my mudra workshop too, I'm not a Tantrika. I'm not like a Tantric scholar. I'm not like a super esoteric Tantric yogi. I just know a little bit. So I'm just going to put that out there, because I don't want you to think I'm like doing these practices 10 hours a day or some extreme Tantric yogi. But I do know that in Tantra, it's considered really powerful to layer the visualization of the goddess with the mantra and a mudra. And so you layer these 3 things: mantra, mudra, meditation. And they say that that actually makes you become the goddess. So whatever that goddess is, it's like you invite that power to rise inside you, and you become that. And so if you need passion, if you're feeling like just like a blob, like uninspired, unmotivated, unexcited about life, then do a practice for Bhairavi. And that's all about fire. But just be warned, it's like Kali, it's uncomfortable, right? Getting into that fire, it's where the friction is. And that's why we don't go there. It's like, it takes a lot of grace and strength and bravery to go there. But if you do, there's something incredible waiting. She shakes the whole foundation, right? So it's like the volcanic fire under the earth's crust that can erupt and shift the tectonic plates of our lives. It can erupt, and it shakes the foundations of the whole world, bringing the fire out of the earth. But part of it too is making the earth fit to receive her. And so if you do want to do a practice for Bhairavi, one of the things that's important is to make your ground fertile. And so having a good diet and doing asana practice or exercising, like taking, because she's first chakra too, and right? And if we go to sort of the classical way of thinking about root chakra, it's about our physicality. On the most gross level, our body, a food body, right? The body that we can touch and see and hear. And so you take care of this really well. The physical body is like the altar on which the inner fire can be kindled. And so we think of our body as the altar, and we treat it with so much love and respect, and we feed it beautiful things, and we bathe it just like in Shava, like the corpse, we bathe it and we give it flowers, right? You put flowers by your bed, and you do lovely things for yourself, and you eat lovely things, and you exercise, and it becomes the altar on which that fire of Bhairavi can be kindled and drawn up. And you know it, right? When you treat yourself nice, you feel more excited about life. When you treat yourself like shit and you sit on the couch and you eat Oreos, which is what I've been doing like 4 out of 7 days a week, you feel crappy. And then it's like a vicious cycle. You don't want to be reborn from the ashes. You just want to sit in your pile of ashes. So any thoughts on Bhairavi? I'm going to see if I missed anything, but shout it out if you have anything to say about Tripura Bhairavi. One thing about her, we talked about Tripura Sundari, so they both have the same word in their name, Tripura, which is of the 3 worlds. So there's Tripura Sundari, the most beautiful of the 3 worlds, and then Tripura Bhairavi, the most fierce or horrible of the 3 worlds. And they're sort of 2 sides of the same coin, that we got to go through Bhairavi to get to Sundari. And that's sort of the practice, is we have to meet Bhairavi. We have to get in the fire. We have to be willing to feel the friction. And when we rise up through that friction, when we ignite our fire, and when we finally step through to the other side, that's where Sundari is, the most beautiful. So Bhairavi is like heat and fire, and Sundari is like the coolness of grace, like the sun and the moon. I'm gonna unmute you all, and we can have the last few moments of anything at all you wanted to share or say, or if you wanted to say goodbye or anything. I love that we've got cats and kids and everybody with us today. Yay. Thank you all so much. So next week we're going to do Bhuvaneshwari, who's the goddess of space, and Kamala. Kamala is actually Lakshmi. They're the same. They're not at all separated. So we'll talk about this too, and then we'll get into some Greek goddesses. I'm super excited. Yeah. Anything else anybody wants to share? Say.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So much fun. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Have a good day.
Next week.